Hello guys, my name is Imran Cisse and welcome to KultrShocK. This is episode 4. Is white privilege still relevant in the UK today? Joining me are the following guests.
Hello, my name's Ryan.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Sam.
Obviously today is going to be a very controversial topic. It's a topic that a lot of people want to know about, white privilege. Now, from my perspective, I believe that white privilege stems as more of a systematic thing that benefits the people that by history and also by power and political influence have a hold on this land and what's dictated on this land. Now, historically, society has viewed more of its standards and also its set precedents based on the individuals that are predominantly owning this land. By, you know, the moment the conquerors came into this land and all of the important parts of this UK have all predominantly been of one demographic of people. And as a consequence of that, there is a natural sense of entitlement that I'm not saying isn't right in some essence, even though obviously it isn't right, but it's something that I'm saying is natural in some essence. If we look to countries like India, like China, these are areas where the predominant demographic of people there hold a level of power to the land and the entitlements of that land, such as job opportunities, education, media, religion, and even family influences. But obviously we'll move on to you guys. What do you think about white privilege? Is it relevant today in the UK?
You guys want to go first?
Well, I personally don't think that it is. I think it's relevant in terms of the argument being made between perhaps different demographics, but I don't think as itself it is A, evident, or B, I don't think it's very prominent in the UK. I think that a lot of the discussions that people hold are very anecdotal about what's happened to them or what's happened within or an individual act of racism, rather than systemic across the board institutional racism. And I think for it to be institutional across the board, I think you've got to have lots of statistical analysis to actually back it up in terms of what's happening to a certain demographic of people. In which this case, I assume we're talking mainly between black people and white people. I'd say that perhaps you'd have to prove an awful lot to prove that across the board it's systemic. Do you know what I mean? That's basically my view on it.
Yeah, to a large extent, what you're saying, obviously, there's some people that are going to be out there that probably have the view that white privilege, it's only a cultural thing, it's only something that affects the individual. However, if we do look at this country's history and the treatment of ethnic minorities, even from the research of people such as Frantz Fanon, there is evidently a common denominator when it comes to the treatment of people of ethnic minorities. I'm not saying there are levels to it. I'm not saying that obviously it's outright, it's in your face, but I'm saying that there is a level to it that has obviously been a remnant of the fact that this country is predominantly white. And because of that, of being white and British in this country, you're naturally led in all the institutions, in my opinion, such as education, such as media, such as the institutions such as government and policing, wherein the benefit of what demographic is going to reap the benefits of these systems is mostly going to be of Caucasian descent instead of people of ethnic minorities. But obviously, Ben, you seem to be like a little bit...
Well, you're talking about unconscious bias. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'd have to look at certain behaviours to point out specific instances of racism, and then me and Sam will both back you up, without that.
It's like if for example if you say anecdotally, for example, in my childhood I faced this and this, and I'd happily stand by you and say, yeah, okay, that is wrong, that's an individual act of racism. But just to say it across the board in terms of white privilege, I feel like it's quite a dangerous statement, because the next question is, okay, if we believe that's a thing, how are we going to fix it? And then if you're saying it's a subconscious bias, the only real way you can fix that is by introducing legislation that, or universities saying, okay, you have to meet a quota of black people, or you have to meet a quota of this, a quota of that. Whereas, so I could apply for university with exactly the same UCAS points, exactly the same experience, exactly the same as you, but you'd get in over me because the university has to accept X amount of black people. So, in a way, trying to fix racism in a systemic system as a subconscious thing will make it a very, very conscious thing by introducing that legislation to fix it. you see what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
It's just to me, like, white privilege doesn't always have to extend or even matter to like the equal opportunity, because obviously if we're talking about like, you know, universities and job opportunities, like, you know, like we're all here, we all like go to a university, attend the same university. Obviously, like, I mean, if you could look around in like our class specifically, like our lower class,
yeah.
like the white to kind of ethnic kind of divide is very evident. There's a lot more white people than there are ethnic people. Not to say that's due to systematic racism, but maybe that's due to some other descent of some other societal error or other things. Like I said, like it's very hard to kind of try and fix something like that, something that we can actually impose legislation. We've already got legislations. We've got the Equality Act of 2010 and the Race Relations Act as well.
And the Discrimination Act.
And the Discrimination Act as well, yeah, good point as well. And like these kind of acts that we have imposed, actually like people can be incarcerated, sorry, or even like aggravate their crimes that they've committed if they are racially offensive as well. But in terms of like white privilege, to me specifically, I think it means more than just opportunity, but more like entitlement. And I think that white people, as like, not everyone, and I'm not saying this because like you said, it's a very broad and very kind of like dangerous topic to say everyone and associate everyone with that. But like there are some white people, or a selection portion of white people, who kind of believe they are not only entitled to their own culture, but to adapt to and like almost take on every other kind of culture they are within. Like they kind of, there's white people who think they have the entitlement to adapt their black culture into their own kind of culture. And to me, that's kind of what white privilege is in some small essence, is the fact that white people kind of feel privileged enough to adapt other cultures into their own.
So, like, for example, you're saying like cultural appropriation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you've got white people now that are not. I have nothing against like the use of spray tans, fake tans, anything else, but
yeah.
like literally physically kind of like using it so you change like your actual skin color, and like there's like saying like, oh, like you look so black today, like, but you're fully white, like she's, I don't know, she's from Kent, but like, you know what I mean, like she's fully trying to change her skin color. And then like the adaptation of like dreadlocks and all that kind of stuff, and cultural appropriation, that kind of essence is, to me, is that sense of white privilege of entitlement to adopt to, you don't just want your own culture, you want someone else's.
Okay, but to answer that though, it's to say, okay, so if I dreaded my hair, for example, let's say, that's a cultural appropriation. But however, if you say, so this country is predominantly white, predominantly from history, so everything that comes from this country, let's say, is of white heritage or white culture, let's say.
Yeah.
Right, but then if you look at, I don't know, companies such as any company in this country, if you buy their product, are you culturally appropriating me? Because it's come from this country, so therefore it's my culture.
And also,
so if you go and buy, so if you go and buy, let's say, I don't know, JCB, everything that's made in this country is made by a JCB digger, does that mean that every building you step into is cultural appropriation? Do you know what I mean? Do you see how dangerous it is to say, okay, well, just because this black person came up with it, I'm appropriating your culture?
It's not so much about like what a black person or a person of ethnic minority kind of creates or invents or anything like that. As you know, like there's a lot of things that are created by ethnic minorities that, like you said, like cannot be culturally appropriated. What I'm saying is, when you've got like things that are inherently and are obviously kind of like black or ethnic kind of culture, and then there's the kind of white people that want to adapt that culture without understanding the culture, just want like either the look or the kind of like the benefits of that kind of culture, then that's when this that entitlement and cultural appropriation kind of takes place. For me anyways, that's the way I see it.
To some essence, like to what you're saying, the main key things that we need to take from this is entitlement and inheritance. Now, from what you were saying in terms of individual instances, if for example with me, I've faced levels of white privilege growing up, and obviously, you know, other black people, other people of ethnic minorities can also come forward. So in one essence, I would like to counter that, because you have people that are higher up, such as like David Lammy, people that have huge influences in society today, people like Akala, even down to celebrities, musicians, like what we discussed earlier with like Dave, important people in society that play a huge role with how it's dictated, from judges that are probably of color and stuff like that, all the way down to individuals like you and I, or even lower than people that are below the red line that are suffering, or people that are going into crime. Everybody has a common root that they can all link to is the fact that they can all recognize whether you have intelligence or you have political influence or you don't. Everybody has experienced a level of white privilege. So if everybody collectively has accepted that this thing as a remnant exists, obviously how to deal with it is one thing, but we can't deal with it if we have the demographic, the majority, the ethnocentric in this society that are still in denial of that. So in some essence, when everybody, if I was to step out now and to show everybody, it wouldn't even fill this whole area in terms of people that have experienced white privilege. As collective society, if we've experienced it in all attributes of society, how do we then, in a way, how could we convince you in some essence that white privilege is a level of seriousness?
I think you have to be quite careful, like in the way that you speak and the words that you use. So you've said that I've experienced white privilege. Well, I disagree with that. I say you've experienced racism, an act of racism, and I would 100%. If you said to me, this white guy said XXX to me, I would say completely wrong. I understand by you 100%. But to say that you have experienced white privilege is institutional across the board for everyone. So how could you personally experience?
I can give you.
Statistics. But I mean, so you asked how you can prove that to me. Show me statistics, or show me an example of something that can be shown across the board and not just an individual.
Okay, fine. All right. So, for example, let me just give you the within the education system where it's more likely for black students and students of ethnic minorities to drop as opposed to their white Caucasian students. The only exception being if you're of Romanian or Eastern European bloodline, you can also stand a likelihood of dropping down. However, black minorities are also more likely to be excluded from white minorities as well. But that aside, the education system, one thing that I have experienced is the fact that within the system, let's say, for example, a subject such as history, wherein that is meant to teach the young students of this society what the remnants of the past were and how the past influences today. History has a huge role in our society and how we think and how our philosophies work. Now, within history, within the school curriculum, the most dominant thing we are taught about is the kings of old. Obviously, this is a country wherein royalty and the patriarchy in terms of the royals is very predominant. We have people such as King Henry VIII or King Richard. We have heroes and villains, and all of them in terms of this person had this huge role, this person had this huge role. And then if we come down now forward, we have the Winston Churchills, we have the most predominant people in society that have played a role in our past that influences us today, and which you guys subconsciously have a level of patriotic respect towards, even in a good way or a bad way, is people of one color. And when that becomes the narrative of our society, I look into a history book, I see someone that doesn't look like me, that are doing things that I, in my head, cannot do. When we have that narrative placed in forward, and then to flip it and now to recognize people of ethnic minorities, be like, don't worry, you know, these guys are kings, but let me show you what you guys did in the history books. If they were to show me now, what would I see? I would see slavery, I would see people that have been incarcerated that look like me, I would see things such as the only changes that you guys made to society is not even on the shores of this country, it was over there in America. Yes, you guys fought in World War II, but we're not going to show you that. Yes, there were the Harlem Hellfighters, but we're not going to show you that. Yes, there were people of influence of color in the British society, but we're not going to show you that. Yes, there are people of color that have made huge impacts. There were countries like in Haiti that rebelled against the French. There are countries in India that rebelled against the English, but we're not going to show you that. We're going to show you our side of history because our side is the most relevant. Now, when you have people that are born here, that have lived here, that serve here in this country, that have to adopt by that narrative, and in their head subconsciously implanted that you're a peasant and they're kings. Because universally, that's what everybody feels. We're feeling that we're fighting an uphill battle. But when you create that setting, how could you then say that white privilege in some essence doesn't play a key role in our institutions? Because
for me, I would say that history, one of the biggest subjects that I can remember is the whole of, you mentioned World War II, but the Holocaust. Last time I checked, I was anti-Semitic and agreed mostly against people who weren't of Aryan race. Now, that to me doesn't display someone as being a villain or a hero in terms of white people being heroes and black people being the villains in that sense, because
No, but no. What I'm saying with that narrative is the fact that the appreciation level goes a long way. So, for example, yes, white people there were Jews that were locked into concentration camps by Adolf Hitler. However, the ones that are depicted in history to liberate those people were people of Caucasian descent. White people were shown as the ones that ended World War II in some essence. Only now in history there is some form of, okay, we can pay attention to, you know, what the Indians did, what the Africans did, what the Eastern Europeans did, what the Russians did, even though we still got animosity against the Russians. Yeah, they played some role, but us as the British and the Americans both combined forces and kicked Hitler's ass. The thing is that it's that depiction that even naturally, as a white person, I would feel like, hell yeah. And you have games, you have media that depict that as the, oh yeah, we've come in to save the day, and everyone else, maybe, you know, if they have some form of role, then it's best not to look into that, because the people that really do care about the narrative are the people that, you know, would, you know, absolutely switch on you if you were to say anything offensive about World War II, which is mostly people of color, of white descent. So in some essence, history, I would say, is a main form of education, a main form of institution that has been painted white throughout this country's history. And because of that, and the lack of acknowledgement for people of ethnic minorities, the people of before are the people of now in terms of the descendants. They will reap the natural benefits that come from this land. Like, for example, if I was told that my ancestor was a king in this land, I had a natural entitlement to this land, I don't care if it's 500 years or some form, or even that, if I found out that my family were a family of heroes, a family of warriors, noble people in society, I will have even if I'm a bloody mailman, I'll have a natural entitlement to what's going on today. I'll feel like I'll be able to keep my head up, and no matter what society throws at me, I'll be like, my people of something of importance. So whatever you say to me, I don't need to listen to you. I'm saying that people of ethnic minorities don't get that choice. That we don't get that. And, you know, it takes a lot for us to, you know, people can go in and search for it. Like, Indians can find out that Indians played a huge part in society today with the roles of Gandhi, despite Churchill, like the roles of what Gandhi did in society. And people of Caribbean descent can also find out that, obviously, you know, despite the issues of Windrush today, they have people that came and fought hard to get into this country, served this country, rightfully so, believing that they're citizens. There are people in society that have done a lot of ethnic minorities to be acknowledged and even play a same role as people that were already here. But then that's the thing, people were already here. That's what I'm trying to say. And because you guys are the main characters and we are the side characters of this story, it's always gonna play out as you guys in the end. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I do agree with what you mean, but how is that? So we talked about history, like you talked about history an awful lot, and obviously how it
as an institution of society.
Yeah, of course. But how does that actually affect us on a day-to-day basis? That's going to affect you and make your life harder simply because you're black.
Okay, so history is dictated by the conquerors. Therefore, the laws are dictated by the conquerors. Therefore, every form of society will be dictated by the conquerors. But then, in some essence, that's the day-to-day. Because of what's happened before, it impacts now, and now everything that's been made in some majority would be of the better good of you guys, of the ethnocentric.
But agree or disagree, the laws in this country are governed by members of parliament who are elected. They're elected by the people. Now, if
by the majority of people that are of Caucasian descent, yes.
So essentially your point is that white privilege is a thing because we have more people in this country who are white, so therefore they're demographic. That's like me saying, okay, this country is, at the current state it's in, is privileged towards people who agree with the Tories because there's more people who vote Tory.
It's because there's people, it's not necessarily just the number of people, it's the amount of power that those people have. So now when you're placed with people that are in the majority that have that level of power and the level of influence, and also the credentials and the past backing the fact that they have a right there, it's going to play a huge role in terms of how they're represented in government, whether the laws that represent them push their narrative forward.
Well, I'd say that if you look at a suburb of Birmingham, for example, that is majority black heritage, and say they can elect one member of parliament based upon population, Chelsea, although maybe one of the richest, or the area of, let's say, a majority white, rich area, they also elect one MP. Both of them have one vote in parliament. So regardless of money, or regardless of heritage or power given to them by the ancestors or kings or queens that you reference, it still doesn't make any difference in terms of making our laws and making things that affect you and affect us as people. I can't see how across the board we're stating that, okay, because in a history book that you read, if you're doing history in the UK, the likelihood is that you're going to do the history of the UK as that syllabus. Why should I be told that I'm a subconscious racist because the history of this country is predominantly white? It doesn't really make sense to me how you make that jump between...
No, it's what you should be told is that there's more to the story than just one angle. There are multiple angles, and multiple angles will allow you to have multiple perspectives of some event. You don't need to naturally, what I'm saying is that obviously that type of information you have to search for when you're someone of ethnic minority. It's not something that's given to you by the system that's put in front of us. And you know, when the system is refusing to give you that level of information that you're entitled to, just like you guys are entitled to your natural level of information, that points questions towards there's a certain ethnocentric amount of people that they're catering to, and that people that they're catering to is people of white descent.
Yeah,
just building on your point, Sam, about like you said about subconsciously being racist and stuff like that. I don't think that like just because that like we're the leading like demographic, or what Imran was saying about how we are kind of the narrative. Just because we're not. When we enter the room, we're not subconsciously racist. And then when we are like formed, obviously racism is learned. We all know that no one's born racist, and it's learned from the environment we're within and everything. But for instance, like, I have no doubt, I'm not saying that both of you, for the fact that you are white, you have to be subconsciously racist or white. That's not what I'm trying to say, or not Imran trying to say. That's not at all. I think what the thing is that the fact that like, we might be like the odd ones out, but there are people that, like for instance, you're talking about history, right? The only two times I've ever learned about Black history, one was during the middle of secondary school where I learned about slavery. That was the only time. And the second time was from Imran, and he was the one who taught me all about the Haitian Revolution. The most interesting thing about that is we were in the same history class, and he taught the teacher about the Haitian Revolution. Obviously, it's not one person can physically know all the aspects of history. But when you're talking about Black history predominantly being ignored, like, it's almost ignored to the extent that it's obvious. It's not something that people can kind of just like go, oh, well, you know, this happens in some cases. The wide case is in the UK, Black history is ignored and Black contributions within the UK is ignored. And obviously we don't learn about American history unless that's like, you know, whatever, depending on study you take on and all that kind of stuff. But like, if you really kind of like read onto like even just European, just not even extend to European, but UK history, and you really go into the Black history of that, like, you will be shocked about the amount of like history there is behind the scenes and the amount of history and depth there is. And in terms of like, you know, Black people's lives kind of being harder, like, I think as white people we can comment statistically and like legally and governmentally on certain things, but I don't think like me as a white person can never even like begin to fathom what Black people could even feel like on a day-to-day basis, and some inequalities they face that they might even just like kind of shrug off as there being like their normal kind of livelihood. You know what I mean? Like there's certain, like they might scroll down on Twitter. Personally, I might scroll down on Twitter for an hour and there's nothing I can say that I will find racist against myself. Like, you can't say the same against Black people. They can't even go on like forms of social media without finding some person being racist against them.
And not just racism in some aspect. Like, first of all, I credit to what you're saying in terms of ethnic minorities have played a huge role when you look into British history and stuff like that. Therefore, those ethnic minorities have a huge front foot in the door. Like, they have an ability to say that they have a natural level of entitlement to things. Now, obviously, as history dictates down to here in terms of government and the system itself, there's been some levels now of growing forms of ethnic minorities blossoming in politics and stuff like that. However, it's not. It's difficult from just looking at that one aspect. It's like, for example, seeing President Obama become president and be like, oh look, Obama's president, we're not racist anymore. Or white privilege doesn't exist anymore because we've elected a black president. Not knowing that most of the system that was built around him was a system of white people that said, you know what, we need to put something forward so that these guys don't say something. Now we flip that over to the UK, wherein, you know, we have people here of colour that are in Parliament and stuff like that play a huge role. It's almost as if when they do say something, say something in the, like that's you know, and I'm not saying that white people also, when they say something, they're not also criticised, but I feel like the news coverage, especially on them as well, is something that's predominantly, you know, in a negative aspect of what they're doing and what they're saying. So, for instance, like when David Lammy went forward and mentioned about the representation of Africans in UNICEF adverts and stuff like that, and the white savior, they all pointed towards him and his family, being like, you have white people in your family. How comes you're saying the white savior? And went harsh on him until a level wherein, if it was flipped forward, people could question whether that same energy is kept. So even if there are blossomings within the government in terms of ethnic minorities, we haven't reached that vocal point yet when we can actually look at each other and be like, white privilege is something that isn't relevant today. It is predominantly relevant in this UK society. So, Ben, you're going to say
something. We've gone through the history, but we've failed to touch on the one thing that is a white person evil, which is slavery. It was white people putting pressure on black people to do what they wanted, and keeping them as objects.
Okay.
But we failed to mention the fact that white people got rid of that. No, white people are taught that that was evil to do that to other people.
Yeah, like that's
definitely, what I'm
saying, absolutely, and that's definitely something that's like very, like kind of like that changed. But also when we talk about like kind of slavery as a whole, what I was trying to mention about slavery, not that it was kind of like, oh, we're trying to say white people are bad and white people are villains, but
the thing
what
is,
I'm trying to say is,
but that is
you
the main
are
thing.
But that's
yeah,
the point.
like,
You saying that white privilege is a thing, you are saying systemically across the board we are all racist. Subconsciously.
It's not.
That
It's not
is.
subconscious racism. It's subconscious privilege. Because if you listened earlier what I said, I mentioned that people in India and China have the same level of privilege. They feel that because of the benefits that they reap into their land. For example, if you were to go to China and try and look for a job, you're more likely to get shunned down from the people there. Simply because they're the people that history dictates.
But just like in this country, statistically, if I was to go for the same job as an Asian guy in an accountancy firm, the Asian guy would get it. So is that Asian privilege in this country? Because
no, sorry, you were gonna say.
No. So I'm saying, if in this country, it's statistically proven that Asian people are perceived as being smarter in terms of finances and maths and things like that, whereas then you've got white people and black people supposedly statistically. Now, is that Asian privilege within this country? Do you see what I mean?
A positive stereotype more than anything.
But how can
so
it's changing the rules? You can't
change
say one thing's a positive stereotype and one thing's racial discrimination.
Because
and you said earlier on, to highlight what you said about subconscious racism. No one's born subconsciously racist. Now, I would agree that no one's born subconsciously racist, but we are all born with a fear of something we don't know. And I was born in an area where I didn't know anything about black culture. Now, that's not me being racist, that's me not understanding it and staying away from it because I don't understand it. You can't criticise people for saying, I wouldn't, if, for example, so I work at a cocktail bar, and one of the nights, it was an Afro-Caribbean night. I worked behind the bar and loved it, loved the music, thought it was brilliant night. However, would I attend that event? No. The reason why I wouldn't is because I don't understand that culture, never have. So, but going to university, I've met a lot more people from that culture and actually quite enjoyed it. But I feared that culture because I didn't know what it was. And I think we're attributing a lot to skin colour rather than the culture of those people. Like you say, you're much more likely to graduate school as a Caucasian person rather than a black person in this country. Mm-hmm. Now, you straight away point to, okay, it must be to do with their skin colour and how white people are controlling that. However, I turn around and maybe wrongly say, okay, well, perhaps it's to do with culture, and say that the role models that you have in your life didn't say to you, do this, do that, work hard through school. It said, go out and do this or do that or do the other.
And why do you think that is? Because obviously, if we go backwards into it, it's not that just them and then that's it. Their role models told them that. Why do you think that?
So we're saying that we're just going to go all the way back to say like an example of where, let's say, slavery, for example. So we're going to say because of slavery, you were told that school's not that important.
No, slavery didn't tell us that school was important.
But
If
that's
anything,
essentially what you're saying.
no. But I'm saying if we go back in time, we're trying to say that the fact that ethnic minorities were told that we weren't able to aspire to anything by how the education system projected us, how they showed our capabilities, how we were represented outside within the community itself. When we had no form of influence, no form of change, when education is constantly telling you in some format that the only thing that your people have actually done in our history books to even get into our history books was slavery, it sends a message out to the young children who grow into that form. Well, obviously you feel different. No. And sorry, to answer your thing, you said that obviously, you know, an Asian person and a white person in terms of work ethic, but then it shows that 76% of white people receive jobs, get a form of employment. Half the percentage of people of ethnic minorities in this country, which is a lot, are people of unemployment as well. And also, people of ethnic minorities are also twice more likely to be rejected of job opportunities than people of white descent.
So that statistic is based upon exactly the same person, exactly the same qualifications, or you're just saying across the board?
Across the board.
So there's 50. Yeah, okay, so, but the thing is, I would argue, okay, that's to do with culture, and that's to do with the fact that, in general, white people are more educated than black people, or ethnic minorities.
But even that, it's not necessarily just education. It's what we're being taught in our schools that will make you think that what you're learning is worthwhile.
But a lot of what you're talking about is this sort of up in the air theory of, okay, well,
it's not theories, because there are people in this society today that have broken through that mold. But the problem is that they've looked back and they said, shit, there's a mold for us. But for you guys, there is no mold for you guys that you have to break. So obviously, when there is that comparison, there's going to be a level of, wait a minute, there's something there that I had to fight through to get in that I didn't see my white counterparts also fighting through. Sorry, Ben, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I don't understand your slavery thing. So my point is, with the slavery thing, you're trying to say black people are only in the history book because of slavery, but that's not why slavery is there. Slavery is in the history book to teach white people, or all societies in general, about a white person evil to black people.
So I'll ask you this, why in combat of slavery, obviously that's played a role to benefit you guys, to obviously allow you guys to do some form of guilt, like, okay, slavery is there not for us, but for you guys, so what's there for us then? I argue that to you. What in history have you learned other than slavery that you feel that your black counterparts could benefit from?
I don't think it's for necessarily colour. It's just for society to learn that me trying to own and control somebody else's life is wrong. It's not about white people. If it was black people doing it to white people, it'd still be in the history books, because it'd be black people.
I'm sorry, but in the UK, when it comes to the narrative that the UK are trying to build, if they're going to build that narrative, it's going to be a level to try and put something on us. Obviously, there's something on you, like what you've just mentioned. White privilege, like slavery, is meant to be put in a way that's meant to teach you guys that something's wrong. But in that sense, if you're trying to build a whole narrative when you're trying to aspire young people through the acts of the past to be better, then you have to show all sides of society wherein there are people of ethnic minorities that are capable of great things. If that works in society as well, then you're creating a narrative for people of colour that also feel that they're British as well, that they're capable of achieving more than what society is intended for them. But when you neglect those people through that works of education, that stems into every other thing, because in this society, if you don't have education, it's very difficult, unless you're talented, to get to a format that someone else without could.
You focus an awful lot on history and stuff like that, but to be honest, you're yet to present something that. So, like I said, like I said at the start, white privilege is quite. I feel like it's quite a dangerous concept to say yes, it exists. To say that it exists, for me, you'd have to have concrete evidence. And at the moment, all you're presenting is okay, well, I experienced this, or.
No, I've literally just chucked you statistics. Okay, I don't know what else.
Yeah, I explained to you that statistics for me is everything to do with culture and nothing to do with colour. It's everything. Okay, so I say to you, okay, why is black on black crime? I don't know the statistic, but why is black on black crime far higher than white on white crime?
Okay,
if it's not to do with culture, if it's to do with race, if it's to do with skin colour, is that white people's fault?
Well, if some people are to look into the more systematic format of black on black crime, you have to look at the geography of where those black people are placed and the history of how those
in
black
the
people are
UK,
treated
we're just
by
talking
the government.
But they're in the UK.
Yeah,
They're in the
Well,
UK.
within the UK, that's what I'm saying.
So
As you're saying, even though crime statistic on a certain level is on par equal, depending on certain regions that you look to. For example, if we were to say that the like knife crime, for example, the stabbings in Glasgow of equal level to the stabbings of London, someone wouldn't presume that. Obviously, Glasgow is majority white, and that's put an equal par in some format. If we are to, let's say we do look into the black on black crime in London now, or in the UK in general.
Yeah.
So when we look into that, we can find the fact that black people that are treated in that format, there is nothing done by the government to kind of tackle those issues.
Okay, so you're pointing to the
Instead of in treating them the way that they should in forms of rehabilitation, in forms of shaping their environment to benefit them, the best thing to do is incarcerate them.
Okay, so you're saying that the government have got to fix the issue of black on black crime, but yet in the next breath you're saying, but in that breath you're saying that the government has got to do more to fix black on black crime. However, 5 minutes ago you were discussing about how the government isn't doing enough to talk about. So is the government good at doing things to help white privilege, or is it bad? Because you're trying to say, okay, it's got to help schools, it's got to incorporate more black history.
No, but listen,
but
you
now
have to
you're saying
understand.
it's failing to do.
No, because obviously when it doesn't mean that you're passing on all formats. You're passing and you're failing on some formats. I'm saying that these are the things that they're failing, and as the conversation is going on, I'm expressing that these are the things that you could achieve, the things that we can aspire to. However, there are problems.
So
I haven't listed all of the problems. You got to remember, whilst we're talking, I present a problem. And then obviously a solution is this and that and that. Maybe the narrative should be that if we can accept the fact that there is an issue in terms of race in this country, and in terms of the treatment of races in as opposed to the people that have occupied this place of ethnic majorities in comparison to ethnic minorities, if we can address that there is some form of divide there, we can treat those issues. But it's hard to treat those issues when there are still people on one side denying that it even exists in the first place. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, okay, but like I said, like I addressed at the very, very start, I said, okay, so let's say for this narrative right now, let's say, okay, we can prove that it exists, like prove statistically that it exists. How are you going to fix it?
I'm going to fix it by changing the narrative of how people of ethnic minorities. But then there you go. So as we were discussing from the beginning, we mentioned education. Now let's change the format of how education is perceived to people of color in forms of history, in forms of English literature. Let's present to them people who are actually made it past the mold of that privilege that we're discussing to people of predominance through these systems, and teach them that, listen, you see this important book that's been placed in society, this was done by an Indian person, this was done by an Asian person, this was done by a black person. You have no idea, in terms of someone of color, how that even feels to you when you find out someone of that looks like you has done something in society. Morally, that uplifts you. Even if you're someone of half descent, of quarter descent, knowing that that has played a role shows, okay, there's a level of progress in society, and that pushes your narrative forward. So, in terms of that, now we deal with the justice system in some essence, where a majority, in fact 93% of people of color, people that are white, that are police officers. When we change the narrative of that, maybe the level of justice on people of ethnic minorities could also have a deep impact as well. Ethnic minorities knowing that you have your own people, it's statistically proven that it's more likely when you're having police officers or people in the justice system of your color, you're more likely to downgrade your level of crime because of that subconscious feel that, oh, they think like us because they look like us. In the UK, that's something that's starting to be implemented because they've seen that there's an anomaly of white people that have grown in the justice system, and the downgrade of crime and the rise of crime to a certain extent because there's a level of lack of understanding in both aspects. What I'm explaining right here is different aspects of how to fix that narrative. The narrative is the white man is UK in some essence. There are some pockets of change and some pockets of differences, but you guys are history. You guys are the UK. If we want white privilege in some essence to change in some format, we have to show all the sides of society in every institution and show to even the younger generation that are growing up that these people, not just the white people, but everybody else is playing a huge role to make sure that the UK is as great as it is. If we can project that into the young people, not only through institution, but also through religion, also through family, through all the areas of socialization, then the narrative will change.
Okay, so you said about presenting people as people that do stuff and present for the UK. Before the podcast started, we started talking about the music scene and stuff like that.
Yes.
Did you or did you not mention one white UK artist in that whole conversation? It's probably about a 15-minute conversation today, wasn't it? Did you mention one white?
No, I actually didn't.
Exactly. So the point is that to say that you keep making these broad statements.
No, but then if I flip
this
it
is
now,
that, this is this, but you're not like you said, 93% of police officers are white. Okay, but have you got statistics of how many people apply to become a police officer? Now, if black
no, but then when the treatment of black people by police officers in this country, why would you want to apply to be in that format? But then if it was projected by us, by education, that black people, and also by our families, who've also undergone in the black society and also societies of ethnic minorities, if we were projected by the society a good image of police officers, then maybe more people would step up in the role, and instead of physically seeing police officers doing an assault and also treating people differently, which obviously the other day there was footage of that person of ethnic minorities that treated people wrong, then maybe the narrative will change. Obviously, changes can happen in society, but the thing is that it's hard to achieve those changes if there is constant denial.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't think we haven't massively come to a conclusion in the sense of you necessarily haven't changed my mind, or I certainly haven't changed your mind.
Definitely.
But one thing I think we can definitely both agree on is that, like, I want to, if you think there is an issue, I might not say that your issue is of that nature, but I definitely want to fix either the way you feel about it or the way people in this country feel about it. I think that's a common goal we can all agree to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that maybe for me, this conversation certainly isn't over, but I think that maybe in future podcasts and stuff like that, we could go on to discuss and maybe have us on again and discuss.
Yeah, definitely. I think like the most important thing to kind of take away from this conversation is the fact that like there are people, like for instance, there are white people and stuff like myself who kind of recognise like white privilege out there and stuff like that, and there's nothing wrong with your guys' views at all. Like absolutely, like everyone has.
You're entitled to your views. I humbly respect them, honestly.
So like it's just like I'm all for having a different conversation again, and everything else is just about like kind of like I said, it's very difficult to kind of change our opinion on something that we've kind of grown up and developed around.
And on that note, I would like to close up this podcast. I would like to thank my guests for being here today, for talking on it. We will spread light in the future. If you have any comments that you want to put down below on this topic, you're more than free to. And like I've said before, like and subscribe. And till I see you next time.